I think he made some slides oh gosh. Uh, Sorry, my cat's knocked off something really big.
Hello, and welcome to this installment of the Future Grind podcast. I'm your host, Ryan O'Shea, and today I'll be speaking with Anna Bethke, the head of AI for Social Good at Intel. In this role, she is responsible for establishing partnerships with social impact organizations and for using Intel's technologies and artificial intelligence to help them achieve their goals. She is also actively involved in the AI ethics discussion and collaborates on research surrounding the design of fair, transparent, ethical, and accessible AI systems. In her previous role at the Intel AI Lab, she developed deep learning natural language processing algorithms as a deep learning data scientist. Anna received degrees in Aerospace Engineering from MIT and previously worked as a data scientist at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, Argonne National Laboratory, and more. We discuss what AI and AI for good even means, bias and AI ethics, available resources, and more. As always, show notes and links are available at futuregrind.org. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever podcasts are found. A video version of this episode is posted on Facebook and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe on all of these platforms, leave a review, and you can also like, comment, and share to spread the word. If you'd like to keep this podcast running, you can donate at futuregrind.org/support. Because of you, this is Future Grind. All right, and now we are here with Anna. Anna, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me here.
So, what is your background, and how did you end up focusing on AI for good?
Certainly, yeah. So I studied aerospace engineering at MIT, which gave me a very strong quantitative background. And when I was in grad school, I studied under Missy Cummings and focused on human factors engineering. So this is basically how do people interact with complex machinery and computers? And there we were specifically trying to see, like how can one person operate multiple robots, in this case, either drones or UUVs, etc. And so that really gave me a taste of statistics, data analysis, as well as people and machines working together. I guess from there, I was essentially like a data analyst and then a data scientist working with first geospatial data and then natural language processing, so like text, looking at sentiment analysis, looking at text duplication, aspects like that. And I guess along the way, I became really interested in how can we apply this technology? How can we apply these types of ideas in a way that was really beneficial? I had started to hear about the data science for social good movement, was seeing what was coming out of the University of Chicago, their program, and other groups like DataKind, Data for Democracy. And then when I was in the Bay Area, I found Delta Analytics, and they really gave me the first taste of how I could actually really apply my skills in a very meaningful way. So Delta, basically what they do is they partner data science software engineers with a nonprofit that needs their assistance. And I loved it. I was helping an organization do some text analytics, and I can talk more about it, but I just really wanted to make that type of thing my day-to-day job. And hence, what led me into AI for social good and, encouraging my group to do more and asking to create a position and a program that surrounds it.
So there's something in your background that I think is very interesting, and that's some of your previous work at MIT's Lincoln Laboratory. And this is, of course, a Department of Defense Research and Development Center. And when most people think of AI for good, their brain doesn't necessarily go to the Department of Defense. In fact,
Right.
It seems that many fears that people have about the misuse of AI stems from potential use in military applications. And I don't think this is necessarily fair in all cases. I think the DoD does a lot of great work innovating technology that has positive benefits. So I'm glad to see that you're in the AI for Good movement and have this more balanced perspective from both sides of the fence. Do you think that influences at all your thoughts on the AI for Good movement today?
I think it does. And it was really interesting when I was working at MIT Lincoln Labs, and then was actually my DoD career, or my the work that I was doing also was at Argonne National Labs. They are a little bit more separated from the DoD, but then my last job right before coming to Intel was also at InQtel, which is a venture capital firm that mostly is on behalf of the US. So I think one of the interesting things through all of those jobs, and most specifically probably the Lincoln Laboratory, is that, I've seen how these types of applications can be used in our government endeavors and seen both like where it can be potentially helpful for both ourselves and those that we are facing abroad, as well as how it could be harmful. So one of the things that I've been looking at is like as we are trying to look at ways to use technology in really beneficial ways. So like these sort of social impact projects, either like for accessibility, for conservation, for the earth, etc. Like how can we do it in a responsible way? And that's also broadly across more projects as well than just those that might be framed in the social good endeavor. So yeah, I think it has given me a perspective on what people are sort of fearful about and how that technology could be used within like our government, within our military, as well as externally across the world, and by companies, by organizations.
I think that makes a lot of sense and could provide some great insight. So many people use the term AI so often and apply it to so many things that it's kind of become an overused cliche. So when you use the term AI, what is it that you're referring to?
Yeah, totally. So I basically, it's very broad for me. So it's any type of algorithm or system that can take in information and make some assumptions or make some decisions about the world that's external to it, potentially making actions, making recommendations, etc. So in a way, it is cliche because it can be used for so many different types of purposes. It's everything from speech to text type of applications where you can sort of see how my words are being translated into written speech, written text, or it can be something much simpler like a recommendation type of system where it's seeing what my previous clicks, my previous buys are and saying, hey, I think you should read this book next or buy this potted plant because you're very into gardening right now.
So you touched upon this a bit in my first question, but what prompted you to start this initiative within Intel, and what was going on with your work then, and how did you move over to this new AI for Good role?
So when I was thinking about doing this, I was a deep learning data scientist. That was my official title, which I still love. But basically, I was looking at natural language processing, deep learning algorithms, and trying to see how we could improve them, both in terms of speed and accuracy. And I had been seeing a lot of different projects throughout the company. Intel has been working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NECMEC, and they're an organization that helps protect children from online or external predators, either from abuse or from trafficking, and other projects as well. But it was hard for me to figure out exactly how to get involved in these projects and how to do it on a day-to-day basis. So I saw the potential for us to do a lot more, to be able to help a lot more organizations than we currently are, because we have such a rich experience in hardware as well as software and data science capabilities. So I basically just sort of saw the need for a centralized program that was able to help others connect to projects if they were willing to either volunteer their time or like they got manager approved time, as well as for more companies to come in, more organizations and say, like, I have this problem, I need some help, what can we do?
So are you still able to get your hands dirty with the coding and research, or what does your typical workday look like now, and how do you spend your time?
My workday is a lot of communication. So, talking with organizations that need help, talking with individuals that are interested in this area. And then I do a lot of evangelism. So, go to different conferences to talk about these aspects and these issues. But, every so often I am able to get my hands dirty in the code. And that's something I think that is important because it helps me keep a pulse on what is the current state of the art in artificial intelligence and data science so that I am able to help guide these orgs that do need help to the resources that they need, as well as to, uh, let my little nerd out and, let her code whenever she can.
So, I've seen the terms AI for good and AI for social good used interchangeably. Do you see a difference here?
Not really. I've definitely used them interchangeably. I think AI for social good is a little clearer because one of the misnomers with both of these is that, all technology does have the potential to do both a lot of good as well as a lot of harm. So even a system that we have the best intentions for can end up hurting somebody or something like the environment, etc. I don't think there really has been a historical example of any single given technology that hasn't affected something in a negative way. So, the social good aspect of it makes it just a tiny bit clearer that, this technology on the whole is going to help individuals. And when I say social, I also do include elements like the environment and animals. But no, there's it's. I was talking to a professor at the University of Waterloo, and he made some slides that was like AI for X goods, where it's, we all are using slightly different terminology. I think data science for social good, code for good, visualization for good. There's very similar concepts throughout all of these different themes. And the biggest one is that, we're all just wanting to give back and use our skills in a beneficial manner.
So, you mentioned that there are some projects that you've seen Intel getting involved with on the social good sphere that you would want to be more involved with. What are some examples of the projects that you're collaborating on now as part of Intel's AI for Social Good initiative?
So some of the projects that we just have wrapped up is TrailGuard AI, and this is a collaboration with a nonprofit called Resolve and the National Geographic Labs. And basically with this project, what we helped Resolve do was embed one of our chips in their device, and they have this motion capture camera. And this camera basically sits on the edges of trails and is able to state if there is any movement that happens. And the issue with the cameras is that they are super noisy. So basically they take 75% of the time there's nothing in the frame. It's just the wind has moved the trees or the lighting has changed. So NVIDIA's vision processing unit that we were able to embed in this camera basically does inference on the edge. It takes any picture that is taken and sees if there is a person or a vehicle at this moment. And in the future, we have a bunch of other models that have for animals, etc.
Bigfoot, any Bigfoot technology out there?
Ooh, I don't know. I guess we could do that would just be a different model. We'd have to get a lot of pictures of Bigfoot
I
first.
see. Yeah, they're kind of grainy, the ones we have.
Exactly. But hey, they might work. Deep learning is fairly robust. Um, but maybe, anything that's not just a tree, detector potentially could work there. But yeah, this helps the park rangers detect the potential poachers because basically what happens is that, once the image goes through the inference, if there is something there, then that's sent to the park rangers along with a bounding box and a confidence level. And then the park rangers are able to say, oh yeah, there actually is something there, or the inference was wrong, and we can improve our models from there. But it greatly reduces the false alarms that they're getting, which helps them, with their job, as well as it helps extend the battery life. One of the things that drains the battery the most is sending all these images to the park station. So it's better overall, basically.
So I had met you at NeurIPS in Montreal when we were both participating in the AI for Good workshop as part of that conference. And one thing that really struck me was all of the posters on the walls of the conference hall that were talking about the AI for Good initiatives. How were these projects identified, and what did that support look like?
Yeah, so we had a couple of posters there, and there were a lot of other posters that were supported by other organizations as well. But the ones that we were presenting, basically, those arose from either somebody in the organization coming directly to an employee, to either myself, or to, somebody else that, is within the Intel network. And basically, what we do from there is we help define the problem. So try to see if one of the examples is there was a future looking project with an organization that is trying to get a handle on what information children in particular have access to, and is it appropriate for their age, is it relevant for their educational studies, or is it just like fluff basically. And so they came to us, and we've been going back and forth and trying to see, what are the various ways that our data scientists or our engineers can potentially help with this problem? Or, is there another organization, another AI for Good group at a different tech company or the volunteer organization, which is better positioned to help potentially? So a lot of it has been coming in word of mouth. Other organizations have ways that you can submit a proposal. So like Microsoft and Google are great examples of this, as well as I think the Rockefeller Foundation has another grant program out, which basically these organizations have a large pot of money that they can like help to give to groups that are looking at these issues, and then also help them with their projects. So that's one way that a lot of organizations have been receiving support from the tech industry.
So just to dig into that a little bit more, when you do support a project, is that mainly financially? Is it mainly access to resources and perhaps technology? Is it mentorship, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so it really depends for us. And it's all of the above. We have given financial support, we have given hardware, we have given mentorship, or worked on proof of concept projects. So like lended our expertise and our time to work on algorithms side by side with an organization, or software support as well. So we have a bunch of engineers who have been working on sort of like the lower level code that's necessary to run AI. So these are like your things like ngraph basically is this layer that sits between the algorithm and the hardware. And what this lower layer does is it helps to optimize runtime and speed up the processing. So what we can do is go into an organization and help give them our best known metrics and how are the different ways that they can speed up their processes as well.
What metrics or other information do you use to choose what initiatives or area to focus on? Is it all about feasibility? Is it about the size of the end impact? Do you look at like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or how do you base on what to pick?
Yeah, so that also really varies and it has in the past. And that is something that we're trying to solidify a bit more. But basically, a lot of it is, what is the end goal? Is this something that we can help with? Is this something that we currently have resources to help with? So this is something that I think all the large tech groups and all the groups that are wanting to help run into is basically, like there's only so many hours in a day. And so like who is available to help at the moment or in the next, like few months to help out with this project, and do those skill sets match with the problem. Some of it too is, what is the impact? It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a very large impact. Like I would rather us work on a project that is able to help feed a village or feed a community, make certain that a subset of a population doesn't go hungry, and work on a problem that has a solution to that in a shorter amount of time. So something that we can help with today versus, ensuring that there is no world hunger in doing that, like a 5-year or 10-year project. I think that there is often a desire to do the hardest and the most interesting or like the most complex problem right away. Whereas, we can make a lot of difference with some of these low hanging fruits, like some of these problems that are easier to help with immediately, or maybe not easier, but more feasible. So basically moving the bar a little, I think can help towards these larger goals. I think the UN Sustainable Development Goals are a great way to look at AI for social good. They cover basically anything that you would want to do. There's other ways though to look at the projects, and I think those are fine too. With the SDGs, I think you still do have to look to see, does this have an impact, a positive impact or not? There's a lot of times where, and I guess like one of the last pieces that we definitely look at is, does the organization that we are partnering with, do they have the ability to oversee the implementation or like help the implementation get out there? A lot of times what we do as like engineers or data scientists or like tech experts is create a solution, create an algorithm, a system that isn't able to actually be deployed out in the world because like we might not know the right people or like we don't have a pulse on the problem that's close enough. So having those close partnerships with the community that is going to be affected by the technology is very important, as well as, if there are any jurisdiction types of questions. For instance, like we can make a bunch of these AI capable cameras, but without the help of like National Geographic Labs, who is in partnership with a bunch of these park rangers, like then it's really hard for us to do the implementation. So yeah, there's a lot of little variables to look at when you're trying to find the right fit.
And who is making those decisions internally within Intel? Does it come a lot to you, or are there other departments that you are looking to for advice as well?
Yeah, no, I look to a lot of people for advice, and it also depends on which groups are being brought in to help with it. So, a lot of some of the projects are coming out of our Internet of Things group. Ones are a data center group. So it really depends on like who are the experts to help with this problem, who brought in the problem in the first place, and trying to help, sort of say, like this is a project that is one that I think we can help with, or, like these are some other resources that this organization that reached out to us can go to instead. And that's really important for me is like, if we can't help, I like to the best of my ability, find the group that is able to help, because it's just important to get the organizations the help that they need at the end of the day, more than making sure it's like one group or another.
I think that sounds great that you within the AI for Social Good initiative have the ability to pull in resources from other departments within Intel so that even if AI for Good isn't their focus of their job, they're still able to contribute in these areas. But one concern that I have is that in the last couple of years, terms such as AI for Good have kind of become virtue signaling marketing terms, and anyone can use these words to describe themselves and their work, and they often do. But how can we make sure that there's a focus on actual progress and impact? Are you concerned that this term might become something like a meaningless platitude at some point?
It totally could. I think it is something to watch out for sure. And it's interesting. Like I can see sort of two sides of the coin of using the term AI for good in marketing material, or at conferences, even, well, podcasts or blogs, etc. On the one case, it is helpful to have a terminology that is somewhat consistent across a lot of different groups, that helps to define what's going on. And at the other time, it is very easy for companies, for groups, for individuals to say that they're doing AI for social good or AI for good because it is such a trending word and topic at the moment. So I don't know. I think like one of the biggest things that we have to keep on doing is keeping ourselves and others honest about this and, to continue to strive to have a real impact. I know that there are some organizations out there, which I highly applaud, that are, sort of not going the marketing route. The one thing that is nice for us to do, though, is by talking about it, is that, the marketing groups often have funding sources. So, like that's another way to help support these missions as well. So there's a trade-off for sure. And I don't know if there is a singular best way to think about it or do it. But the one thing I think we are pretty good at as like an AI community is like pointing out when people are using terms in a way that isn't representative of the truth. So when companies are saying that they're using AI when they're really not, or reinforcement learning, or any of these other AI terms, we definitely point the finger and be like, oh, yep, nope, that's not real.
So when it comes to AI ethics, there are a lot of big topics today. Things like explainability, transparency, democratized access to AI and the resources and the tools. Are there any things that you're particularly concerned about that you think we need to be thinking about when it comes to AI and its impact on society?
Definitely. I think all of I call them ethical pillars, are important, and they all have different difficulties in implementing them in the wild. So this includes things like bias or fairness, transparency, accountability, privacy, security, human rights. So all of these are basically, a lot of these are there to sort of say, like how can this system potentially do harm, and are there ways that we can either change the system, mitigate it, or if necessary, say a program isn't ready for release. And it's a topic that I'm definitely heartened to see so many organizations and so many people talking about. I think one of the hardest things that we are facing as a community is, how do we take these ideas and put them into action? And there's sort of like a language divide almost in this instance. So, like one of the things that we've seen with bias and fairness is that once our communities were really more cognizant of this fact, a bunch of fairness toolkits came out, a bunch of different fairness metrics. How do we measure fairness in a data set? And then, like once you can measure fairness or measure fairness in an algorithm, then you can write another algorithm potentially to fix it. But that's not like the full answer. I think one of the things that we often like to do as, algorithm designers and developers is solve problems in an algorithmic way. But whereas what's really necessary in these instances are both algorithms and discussions. So having these conversations, and this is something we saw at NeurIPS, certainly, as well as a lot of other conferences, and it's becoming more of a topic of discussion in conferences, which I think is also good, is to sort of say, like, what are the right measurements of fairness? Even that goes back to the measurements, but like, what does this actually mean? And, like, what are the issues that are underlying this bias problem? So one of the things that has been pointed out is that with bias in particular, it's shedding a lens on some of the biases that we have in our society that are not as well known. So I think one of the papers that I really like and don't like at the same time, and this is like that paper that's, I think the title is, man is to coder as woman is to homemaker or something. And this is basically looking at a word to vec model that is trained off of the Google News data set. So it's basically just ingesting a whole bunch of text that, a lot of different individuals and people have written. And in these documents, there are these like underlying biases based on gender. And we have a lot of other underlying biases too, based on either race or occupation, religion, where people are from. And so it's super complex, and it's super difficult to really get to all of the underlying issues. But I don't know, I think there is a need for both like these like algorithmic solutions, same with transparency, privacy, security. So one of the things you were asking about my day-to-day job, one of the things that I do quite a bit is talk with individuals both in Intel as well as external to Intel, either through organizations like the Partnership on AI. Have been starting to talk to more individuals through IEEE, as well as Data for Democracy is a group that has been looking at ethics for quite some time, and others as well. Is like, how do we come to terms with this fact that, like the systems and the algorithms that we might be making aren't best for society? And we've only really started to see, I think, a lot of our organizations, and I've definitely seen it at Intel, we've already had been turning away various projects because we didn't think they were the right ones to do from like an ethical perspective. And those often don't hit the news. I don't think it's not very business savvy for us to say, oh yeah, no, I turned down that contract and I turned down that contract, because then the stockholders are like, oh, well, you're turning away business. That's not good. And hopefully, our stock won't go down once this podcast airs. But, it's something that I think we all have had to do and just, haven't talked about it a lot. I think the OpenAI text generation algorithm was one of the first that had a very large public announcement saying, like, we did this work and we don't think it's right for us to open source it. So I don't know. It's interesting to see how this space is evolving.
Yeah, there are a lot of things relevant to this that I'm very conflicted about. And I think a recent example came out a couple of weeks ago when news broke about a Georgia Tech study that showed that self-driving cars could potentially be worse at detecting people with darker skin tones and might disproportionately hit them as opposed to people with lighter skin tones. And this is, of course, a major issue. But what I am a little bit fearful of is, what if these self-driving cars hit everyone at a lesser rate, but still disproportionately hit people with darker skin more often? Would we want to put self-driving cars on hold and be okay with more road deaths a year and more injuries a year, as opposed to putting out a system that disproportionately hits people with darker skin tones? And I certainly don't have an answer to this. I don't imagine that you do, but these are the types of ethical questions that I think we're going to have to address. And I don't know really how we as a society are going to deal with this.
No, it's a great question and a great example too. And I certainly don't have the answer either. I think, this is similar questions like this have been facing ethicists and social scientists for much longer than AI has been around. I don't know if our society really gathered and discussed and tried to figure out if, the initial cars that were on the road, if that was a good idea. And I could say that, we have all benefited from cars in one way or another, and we have also all come to some harm, like whether or not we've ever been actually hit by a car or known somebody who was, pollution or the congestion, the noise, etc., all have a toll on us in some way. I'm also not a medical doctor, so that might be overstepping my knowledge bounds, but it's something that is sort of a commonly held belief as well. And so I don't know, it's a really hard question to ask. And it's a variant of, the time-honored trolley problem. If you go this one path, you affect a certain number of people in a certain subset, versus if you change the lever and go this other path, then these other individuals or subset of the population is affected. And there's no clear answer to this for sure.
So some people in my audience are going to loudly sigh when I ask this question, and others are angry that I didn't bring it up already because it's a very divisive issue. But in terms of artificial superintelligence and artificial general intelligence, are these things that you're at all focusing on when you're talking about AI for good, or do you see that as too far down the line to really think about?
I haven't really thought about it, no. I know that others are, and the closest is things like automatic machine learning, but that's more like a model to train all models, so slightly different, I think.
Who are the other players in the AI for good space? You mentioned a couple, but are there any organizations, groups, or even other companies that you think are doing particularly good work that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, no, so I really do think that like the large tech companies that I know of that are in this space, I know mentioned Microsoft and Google. IBM has been doing a number of projects as well as Facebook does some. I think that Element AI, they're a smaller startup company founded by Joshua Bengio. They have a group that is looking at it, and they're also like not as tied to like marketing dollars, which I think is a very cool business model. And then there are organizations that are helping to do the connections. So things like DataKind, Delta Analytics, Data for Democracy, Code for America, places like that. Driven Data, I think, is a really unique and cool business model. So like basically they have a bunch of consultants who help organizations with their social good projects. But then they also host these Kaggle like competitions that are specifically for good. So that's a place that I often send people if they are wanting to try out their hand, sort of see what data science for social good means. Because Driven Data has a bunch of those there. They also have a cool AI ethics checklist that I'm often talking about called Dion. And the thing I really like about this checklist is that it does go through a bunch of the different ethical questions that you might want to be asking during a project's life cycle. And so it can help guide you to the right questions to ask as well as additional resources. There's a bunch of universities too that are in this space. The University of Chicago's Data Science for Social Good is one of them. And then a couple of groups that I've been working with is out of the University of Southern California. There's a lab called CAIS, like CAIS. And Carnegie Mellon also has a very strong AI for social good group too. So, those are two that University of San Francisco, so USF, is a third university that I've been working with more closely. But there's a bunch more. So I think a lot of classes are starting to sort of gear their capstones towards the socially impactful projects. We have something going on with the Oregon State University right now. And then I have an intern that's at UCSD, University of California, San Diego. And her capstone was looking at obesity and the prevalence of like supermarkets and like how what those supermarkets looked like. So it's interesting, like all these different projects that are cropping up around this space. And I think, teaching the future of tomorrow is huge. So groups like AI for All are doing wonderfully in this space, like teaching students, especially that might not otherwise get access to coding experiments or resources. It's brilliant, like running these different boot camps and other hackathons. There's a group, Iridescent, I think they're called. I don't know. I could keep on going for a long time, but a bunch of people are trying to help, kickstart these almost like I'd say like cottage industries in different areas of the US as well as the world that is teaching others how to use technology. And like the thing that I really see that's beneficial from those types of projects is that we're giving these organizations, the individuals, the tools that they need in order for them to create their own AI systems and solutions. And that's going to really help to create something that is better for their own use than us coming in and saying, oh, you just need this algorithm or this like system and go with it. Whereas, like when we build these systems and these algorithms, they're stuff that, we see problems with. They're for sort of like our own benefit, I guess. No, but there's a lot. There's a ton.
Yeah, that was a great list there. And I'll make sure to put links to all of those different organizations in the show notes at futuregrind.org so everyone can go there to see the list and look into them more. In terms of resources, are there any books or papers or other media that has greatly influenced you or that you think could be a great place for people to start their journey into this space?
Certainly. I think more on the AI ethics side of things. So I think that there are some publications and materials for the socially impactful projects. So I would actually look at the NeurIPS workshop that we were at. Well, we can put those in the show notes too, but looking at the papers that were accepted there is a start. And I think that the USC also has some material on this. In terms of books, I read Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy O'Neill, and then Algorithms of Oppression, I think by, oh gosh, sorry, I'm just blanking on her name. But there's a whole list of books that we can also put in the show notes. Like Safisa Noble has one. There's Uberland. And I think the really interesting thing about these books is that, they do show how technology and how AI have been used in ways that can be harmful in the past, as well ways as, like where they were potentially intended for good, but like where it might not have actually panned out that way. So yeah, there's a lot of material on definitely AI ethics, a lot of books. There's a whole tome that I'm forgetting the name of, but I'll send that your way as well. It's like 1,000 pages, but Surveillance Capitalism. That's the name. That comes out of a professor from University of New York. I don't know. I'm butchering that, but she's associated with the Data and Society as well. So my apologies to everybody's names that I butchered in their books. They're all wonderful, though.
Well, I'll make sure to put I'll fact check everything and put it in the show notes with the correct attributions and everything. But I think that is a great list, and I would suggest everyone go to the show notes to check that out more. I guess the last thing, if anyone wants to find out more about your work and follow along, how can they do that?
Yeah, totally. So we have a website that lists a bunch of projects that we are currently doing or the ones in the past. That's at intel.ai/AI for social good, where the 4 is the number 4, because I'm a data nerd, so I like it. And I'm on Twitter. I can be followed at DataBeth, data_Beth. So yeah.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining me on the podcast. I think this was a great conversation with a lot of great information and especially a lot of great resources for people to check out and look into more. So thanks again for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and hope you're all having a good week.
Hey everyone, Ryan O'Shea again, and thank you for listening to my interview with Anna Bethke. Remember to check out the show notes and more at futuregrind.org. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and you can also like, comment, and share to spread the word. We also need your help to keep this podcast running. Just go to futuregrind.org/support. Till next time, this is Future Grind.